Okay, for today we're doing lesson 13. It has the same target as what we were doing yesterday. So we're just going to continue on with using measurement tools to convert mixed number measurements to smaller units. Okay, so we're going to start off here with ounces and pounds. Okay, as you can see here from our tape diagram and our number line, there's 16 ounces to equal our 1 pound. Okay, so if this whole tape diagram here represents 1 pound. Okay, so then that means 1/16 of a pound would be 1 ounce, because there's 16 ounces in that pound. Okay, so now we think about what's 1/2 of a pound equal. Okay, so again we think, well, what's half of 16? Okay, half of 16 would be 8. So 8/16 would give us our 8 ounces. Okay, now some of these other ones are going to be a little bit different. Okay, so now we think, well, what is 1/4 of a pound? Okay, so we're thinking here 1/4 times what to get us our 16ths. So 4 times 4 is 16, so 1 times 4 would be 4. So 4/16 of a pound is 1/4 of a pound, which is then 4 ounces. Okay. So now we think 3/4 of a pound. Okay. Well, if 1/4 of a pound is 4 ounces, well, we're going to have 3 of those. So that means we have 12/16 of a pound, which is 12 ounces. Okay. So now for our next one, if we think about 1/8, I'm trying to convert that into 16ths. Well, again, I know that 8 times 2 is 16, so 1 times 2 is 2. Okay, so 2/16 of a pound is 1/8 of a pound, or 2 ounces. So now we have 3/8 of a pound. Well, if 1/8 is 2 ounces, we're doing 2 times 3 to get our 6/16 of a pound, or 6 ounces. Okay, now for number 2, we need to draw a tape diagram to show that 2.5 pounds equals 40 ounces. Okay, so we have our tape diagram here. I'm going to draw 3 sections so that each one of them is 1 pound. Okay, because I have more than 2 pounds, so I'm going to draw 3 pounds. Okay, now I know that 1 pound is 16 ounces. So this is 16 ounces. This is 16 ounces. Okay. Now I know that 16 plus 16 is 32. So this is 32 ounces. I have 40, which means I need 8 more, because 40 minus 32 is 8. Now I know that 8 is half of 16, back from what we did up here, number 1. So I'm going to split this last pound in half to create my 8 more ounces. Okay. All right. Now moving on to number 3, we're going to move on to time. Okay. So we know that there's 60 minutes in 1 hour. Okay. So that means each minute is 1/60th of an hour, because there's 60 of them to make the hour. Okay. So then we think about, well, what's half of an hour? Okay. So you can see that little line in the middle showing that half of 60 is 30. So 30 minutes is half of an hour. Okay. Now this next one's a little bit trickier, because we need to know what's 1/4 of an hour. So we think 1/4 times something to get us our 60 minutes. So we need to figure out 4 times what is 60. So if we do some quick division, if you don't know this already in your head, we can divide this out to see that there's 15 minutes. So we're going to take our 1/4 and we're going to multiply by 15/15ths to show that 15/60ths of an hour equals 1/4 of an hour, which is 15 minutes. So 1/4 of an hour is 15 minutes, and we're going to need to remember that for the next page. So next, for number 4, we're going to draw a tape diagram to show that 1.5 hours is 90 minutes. So we're going to draw a tape diagram. I'm going to put it into two sections to show 2 hours. Okay. So here's 1 hour, and then here's another hour. Okay. So we know that this right here is 60 minutes. Okay. And 90 minus 60 is 30. So we're going to split this last bar in half to create our 30 minutes. Okay. And now we can see our 60 and our 30 to get our 90 minutes. So you have your 1 and 1/2 hour to get your 90 minutes. Okay. All right. So moving on to our next page here, we're just going to do some quick conversions. Okay. Again, going from a larger unit to a smaller unit. So we have our 1 1/8 pounds turning into ounces. Okay. Well, 1 pound we know is 16 ounces. Okay. So what's 1/8 of 16? So we think 1/8 equals how many 16ths? Well, 8 times 2 is 16. 1 times 2 is 2. So we have 16 ounces for a pound, and then 2 ounces for our 1/8 of a pound, total of 18 ounces. Okay. So moving on to our next one. Well, now we have 3 3/8 pounds. Okay. So I know that to find out our 3 pounds, we need to do 16 times 3. So we're going to write that out here instead of putting it in our head. So I've got 48 ounces for my 3 pounds. Now we have 3/8 of a pound. So looking back at what we did in letter A, 1/8 is 2/16. We're going to have 3 of those. So 2 times 3 gets us 6 more ounces. Okay. So again, you're thinking about 3/8 equals how many 16ths? 8 times 2 is 16. 3 times 2 is 6. So now we can add these up, and you can see that we have 54 ounces. Okay. So moving on to the next one. Again, pounds to ounces. Okay, so we're going to take our 5 pounds and we're going to multiply that times 16 and do that off in the margin. Okay, and we're going to see that we have 80 ounces from our 5 pounds. Okay, and again, we have 3/4 equals how many 16ths of a pound? So 4 times 4 is 16. 3 times 4 is 12. So then we have 12 ounces from our 3/4 of a pound. Add those up, we get 92 ounces. Okay. All right, next one. Again, we have our 5 pounds, and we already did that over here in C, so we know that that's 80 ounces. Okay, 1/2 of a pound. So again, we think 1/2 is how many 16ths? Okay, so we can see that that's 8. So now we have 8 ounces. Add those up, we have a total of 88 ounces. Okay. Moving on to letter E, now we switch over to time for a few questions. So we're going from hours to minutes. So 1 hour we know is 60 minutes. So now we need to know 1/4 of an hour. Now, if you think back to what we did on the previous page, okay, we found out that 1/4 of an hour, and number 3, 1/4 of an hour is 15 minutes. Okay, so now we can use that knowledge over here in letter E for 15 minutes. Combine those up, we get 75 minutes. Okay, so our next one we have 3.5 hours. Well, 60 times 3 is 180. So we have 180 minutes. 1/2 of an hour we know is 30 minutes. We add those two numbers up. We have a total of 210 minutes. Okay. So now 2 1/4 hours. Okay. So 60 times 2 gets us 120 minutes from our 2 hours. 1/4 of an hour, like we set up above in letter E, is 15 minutes. So we add those up, and we get 135 minutes. Okay, moving on to the next one here. 5.5 hours. Okay, so again, we're doing 60 times 5 So it gets us 300 minutes from our 5 hours. Half an hour, like we did up in letter F, is 30 minutes. So now we're adding 300 minutes plus 30 minutes for a total of 330 minutes. Okay. Moving on, switch over to yards and feet. Okay. This should be a little bit easier. So we know that 3 feet equals 1 yard. So that means we have 9 feet from our 3 yards. And 1/3 of a yard, well, 1/3 of 3 is just 1. Okay. Let's add these up. We get 10 feet. So now for our next one's a little bit different. 7 times 3, because of our 3 feet, gets us 21 feet. 2/3 of a yard. Well, again, 1 yard is 3 feet. So we have 2 of those, 2 feet. So we add these up, we get 23 feet. Okay, so for our next one, we know that 1 gallon equals 4 quarts. So if we have 4 gallons, 4 times 4 is 16 quarts. Okay, now half of a gallon, well, we just think what's half of 4, so that's 2 more quarts. Okay, so if a full gallon has 4 quarts, half of a gallon has 2. Add those up, we get 18. Okay, same thing with our next one. So we do 6 times 4, okay, to get our 24 quarts. And then 3/4 of a gallon. Okay, so again, if 1 gallon has 4/4, 3/4 of a gallon would then have 3 quarts. So we add those up and get 27. Okay, last 2. Okay, inches and feet. Okay, so now 5 feet. So we're doing 12 times 5. Okay, and that gets us 60 inches. Okay. Now it's a little bit different here because 3/4 of a foot, or 3/4 of a foot. Okay. So we need to think 3/4 is how many 12ths? Okay, because there's 12 inches in a foot. Well, I know that 4 times 3 is 12, so 3 times 3 is 9. So that means we have 9 inches over here. Add those up, we get 69 inches. Okay, so following up here, our last one, well, 8 times 12, okay, gets us 96 inches. And then again, we want 1/3 of a foot, so we need to think what's 1/3 of 12. Okay, so we need to think how many inches is 1/3 of 12. So 3 times 4 is 12, 1 times 4 is 4. So then that means we have 4 more inches over here. Add those up, and you get 100 inches. Okay.